there you have it.
It's amazing.
We had, I mean, it was the most fun I've ever had directing a movie because it was just drawing upon everything that I grew up with those great Vincent Price movies. So, anyway, do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
So you're filming this movie. How often did the cast break down laughing?
We could barely get through a take without everybody cracking up. It was so much fun. I mean, and all of the actors were comic actors, and several of them from the Groundlings, which is the great improv academy in Los Angeles, where Cassandra Peterson started out and started developing her Elvira character there, along with Paul Rubens, who developed his Pee Wee Herman character there, and so many people have come out of that academy as recently as Melissa McCarthy and many stars, many cast members of Saturday Night Live. We saw that Phil Hartman was thanked. He was a very, very close friend of Cassandra Peterson's, and also the co-writer, John Paragon, who was also the co-writer of all the Pee Wee Herman things, and he plays Jambi the Genie in Pee Wee's Playhouse. They were all part of the Groundlings, and they were very close friends. And just before this project was about to be written, Phil Hartman died very tragically, and Cassandra and John Paragon, who wrote the script, had several ideas of what direction to go in with an Elvira movie, and they decided to conduct a little informal seance to ask Phil Hartman which way to go, because they always felt like he had the best advice. And so they got one of those 8 balls. What do you call it? The magic 8 ball. And they had Phil Hartman's urn with his ashes, and they had the magic 8 ball, and they said, "Okay, do we put Elvira in a Western?" And they turned it over and read, no. And they went through all of their different things, and they said, "How about Elvira with doing the Vincent Price spoof of the Edgar Allan Poe movies?" And whatever it said, yes, and it was very definite. And that's why they thanked Phil Hartman. Yes?
Well, how did you end up in Romania, and what was it like filming there?
Good question. Cassandra had actually gone over to Romania before I was involved as the director to scout castles. And there all these great Transylvanian castles, and they all claim to be Castle Dracula. Vlad the Impaler had visited for 5 minutes. It is now Castle Dracula. And so when tourists come over there's about 1 million of them to choose from. But I'd already done 2 films in Romania, Oblivion and the sequel, Backlash Oblivion 2. And I had visited, on days off, I'd gone to visit Castle Dracula's, and several of them. And there was a couple of them that didn't look right, and there were others that were almost ruins, that were at the top of mountaintops and had no electricity, no running water, no heat. And I just said to her, it's going to be really hard to shoot in one of these castles, and it's going to take an army to light it up for nighttime. All the lights that are required, and generators, and everybody's going to be uncomfortable, and the actors are going to be grumpy. And the Roger Corman, Vincent Price movies were not shot in castles, they were shot on sets, and that was part of their charm, and being set bound and having having everything created. And when they showed the outside of them, they were matte paintings or models. And I convinced her that if we were really going to spoof it, we needed to do that. And the beauty of coming to Romania was that the labor was so cheap, we could actually afford to build these incredible sets that you see in this film. And so she agreed that that's the direction we would go. Thank heavens. And the production designer who had done the Oblivion films with me, his name is Radu Korcheva, I sent him all of the Edgar Allan Poe movies ahead of time to look at, to kind of get into the spirit of what to design, something in the vein of those. And I said, and we want to do, like when Corman did the Pit and the Pendulum set, he just built the slab and the pendulum and had some of the walls, but didn't really complete the entire dungeon. What they did was they got matte painters to add on to the set in the wide shots. And so he read it and said, oh, well, we have some, you know, old matte painters from the old days of filming here. Well, I'll get in touch with them and we'll do that. So when I finally get over there, he says, well, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is all the matte painters have died, and so we're not going to be able to do matte paintings, but come with me. And he takes me into the studio, the sound stage, where he walks me into that Pit and the Pendulum set, which is completed from, you know, bottom of the pit to the tallest ceiling in its entirety. It was like walking onto Pinewood Studios James Bond set or something. It was so huge, and I literally cried. I was just, I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And they had painted these Hieronymus Bosch murals and just everything. It was unbelievable. And then they had a leftover set on another movie that had sewers and stuff. So the whole thing where Zuzu's hanging in that cage and there's all this water and stuff, that was completely re-transformed from this other set into a second dungeon. So we had, you know, we just had these amazing things. And then the whole interior of the castle with the big staircase. And I told him if they did a staircase, I didn't want a banister or anything. I wanted it to be like, well, like, you know, the Bela Lugosi Dracula steps, or, but it was also some steps that were very similar to Haunted Palace. And so, anyway, I drew a schematic of where the steps had where the whole living room had this slice through it, and the whole concept that the steps were going to pull apart when Bradley's coming down to the jewelry box and slide back together, and we came up with that whole concept. But anyway, it was just incredible to build all of those sets. So I don't know if that answered the question. I forget what the question was.
Great.
But that was that's how it all happened. Who else? Yes, sir.
Did you direct any other Elvira movies, or was this the only one?
There's 2 Elvira movies, and I only did this one. This was the second one. The first one was in 1988, and it was called Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. And that one took place in the present day. So this is not really a sequel in the traditional sense of sequels. This was, she really wanted to do another standalone movie that would stand on its own. And so it was a different time period and everything. But ironically, both movies are, the motivation of the character in the first movie is, it's all about Elvira needing to get to Las Vegas to become a Las Vegas performer in a burlesque show. And this was all about Elvira trying to get to Paris to be a burlesque performer in a burlesque show. So they're kind of telling the same basic story. her trials and tribulations of going from A to B. Anybody else? Yes?
Can you talk at all about directing the musical, like the music number, the music scene?
Oh yes, well, the gentleman that you see at the very end who is in the coach, that picks them up at the very end, that was our choreographer. His name is Jerry Jackson, and he had been, when Cassandra Peterson started out, long before Elvira, she was a performer in Las Vegas. And he was her choreographer way, way, way back then. And he wrote the song that you hear them sing, and then choreographed the sequence while he was there, and it was just fantastic. And they were, you know, such long-standing buddies and everything. It was great. And then just, you know, in terms of directing the sequence, we just tried to come up with funny gags, you know, and everybody's contributing. And once we cast the actress who played Roxana, the very, very slender niece of Lord Helzibus, we came, I came up with the idea is that you've got to like pick her up and spin her around, and we can create this little dummy, that we can slip in there and have you, because she sort of goes out of the frame for a second, and Elvira when she's out of the frame, and of course we pull back the dummy and spins around, and then it was, we kept thinking, what is going to be the finale? What's going to be the finale? And Cassandra said, well, I can wear red underwear and I'll just, bend over but it just, nothing was quite final with it. And I suddenly I was just thinking red ending, and I thought about in TV studios, they always put on the applause sign in red to get the audience to applause. And I thought, what if you have applause written on your butt? And she was like, that's it. And so that's what happened there. But it was everybody coming up with different ideas. I mean, the other thing that gets a big laugh, always gets a huge laugh in the film, is the stable stud with the dubbed voice. And what happened there, we originally wanted to get Fabio, the guy that does all the pose for all the romance novels and everything, and that guy we sent him the script, he just had no sense of humor, he didn't understand what we were doing, didn't get it, did not want to do it, and we're like, whatever. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, and we were a little over budget, trying to, we spent, we'd already kind of committed a lot of things, and he was going to cost more money than we really had. And so Cassandra and I just decided, you know what, there's got to be a hunky guy in Romania. We'll just go over there and cast him along with a few other tiny parts. And so we get over there and we start interviewing different actors, and there was either, if they spoke English well enough, they weren't good looking enough, or they were really good looking and they spoke no English whatsoever. And but this guy that did play it, he walked in, he had natural long hair. Everybody else we were going to have to put a wig on, or and that was already going to be an expensive thing and look fake. But he just walked in and just looked the part to us, and we were like, but he opened his mouth and had a very thick Romanian accent, and we tried to teach him English or get him to speak the lines phonetically. It wasn't happening. You couldn't understand a thing. And suddenly I said to Cassandra, what if we just let him play the part in Romanian and we badly dub it like those Hercules movies? And she was like, I don't know. Don't you think it's like a one-joke thing? Like it'll get a laugh, but then he's got several scenes, and so we're going to see this, and I'm like, I don't know, something tells me this could be funny. And so we were terrified about the idea the whole time. And one of Cassandra's friends in the US is a big voiceover guy and does a lot of cartoon voices and everything else. And he's the one that came into the studio to dub his voice. And he was just brilliant. I thought he did an amazing job. But we were terrified about it right up to the time that we had our first screenings of the film. And much to our great delight, he gets laughs every time he comes on. So it really turned out to be great. But that was a risk. We were walking a thin line there. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah. As a director, do you tend to do things like do storyboards in advance?
Well, I'm not a great artist, so I do very detailed shot lists where I write out everything. The other thing that I find about storyboards is that if I'm trying to imagine like a camera moving, it's hard to do that in still frames on a storyboard. It is just easier for me to just write it out. Okay, a crane shot's going to swoop down from here to there, or something like that. But to this day, I just write everything out. Very detailed shot lists. Yes.
Did this get a theatrical release?
It had a very brief theatrical release. And And then we started doing midnight shows. We were hoping it might be, you know, turn into a Rocky Horror kind of thing on Friday and Saturday night midnight shows. And Cassandra and I did a bunch of them for several months in Los Angeles, trying to get sort of the cult thing going. And we would go and do this sort of thing and do Q&As afterwards and appear. And but it didn't have a distribution company that really put any money behind it, and so it never reached an audience, and it was very frustrating at the time. Cassandra and her husband financed the movie themselves and mortgaged their house, and it was very difficult on them financially at the time because the movie wasn't making its money back. And so, you know, it's been, for her, it's, you know, looking back on it, you know, it's not as thrilling a ride as it was for me because of all the financial worries that they had over it. She's, you know, over the years, it's come out on DVD and with different companies, but now she's just very recently gotten all the rights back, and she's shopping it around to streaming companies, and will eventually, you know, someone will pick it up and have a Blu-ray release and all that kind of stuff. So we hope it's going to finally find a wider audience.
It will. It's a great movie.
Thank you. Yes?
I just kind of noticed there are a lot of different sort of looks or lens changes. What were your, you know, what were your inspiration? What were you trying to do there?
Well, I'm such a fan of the Corman films that we just kept doing little things that Corman had done. And if you notice during the dream sequence, when Elvira is coming down the stairs, you see the anamorphic lens, the cinemascope lens that was twisting back and forth, and that's exactly what Corman did in a bunch of his films. And when you would have dream sequences and everything, and literally we just took the anamorphic lens and we were holding it in front of the camera and just turning it like this, and it just recreated exactly what he had done. It astounded us as to how much it looked like what he had done. I mean, there's so many things. The opening credits with the swirling paint, that was from the opening credits that he had done for some of his prize films. And there was a scene in the graveyard where I guess there's an echo or something, and the camera swish pans between Richard O'Brien and her like 3 or 4 times, and that was right out of, I believe it was Tomb of Ligeia. There's a scene where they're having a conversation outdoors in a graveyard, and every line is like, he says a line, whoosh, switches pans to the other person, they say a line, switch pans back, and it goes on for like, 10 lines, and I was like, we have to spoof that. That is that's the craziest camera work I've ever seen. And just on and on and on. So many little, the glasses that Richard O'Brien wears outside were from Tomb of Ligeia. That's what Price was wearing in those. And in the, for those who don't know, like in House of Usher, he has very sensitive, the Vincent Price character has very sensitive hearing, and you can hear the rats scratching in the walls in the dungeon and all of that. And then in Tomb of Ligeia, he has very sensitive eyes, and you can't, so we just sort of went to town with, okay, we're gonna have somebody who's all of his senses are very sensitive, so. And we sort of, did an amalgamation of that. Trying to think what other obvious, obviously the pendulum was completely ripped off. And, gosh, lots. Even the stair in the dungeon where the water is and Suzu's in the cage, those stairs were wooden and sort of almost scaffolding-like stairs, and that was right out of the Haunted Palace, because that's the way those stairs were. So I wanted those stairs to emulate that. At every turn, we were always trying to do something that Corman had done in one of the Poe movies. Yes?
I was trying to figure out all the those stories there and there. I missed the tomb of idea, but of course you got the pendulum.
Yes.
You got the castle of Montalado, of course. Fall House of Usher.
Telltale Heart.
Yeah, and there was also the Raven, and of
I
course.
saw the Raven and I saw the Black Cat.
Yes. Yeah.
Many others I'm missing.
There's so many. I can't think. But yeah. The Ema character was sort of based on the Barbara Steele and Pendulum, and she of course ended up in the what do you call it?
Iron Maiden.
Yeah, the Iron Maiden,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
all of that. So that was all based on Barbara, who I was always a huge fan of as a
Yes.
kid, from all her films, like Sunday and Haunted Castle, or whatever it's called, Nightmare Castle, and everything she did. And so we were just trying to do an homage to everything. The music, I temp scored it with a lot of Hammer film music, actually, and a lot of Harry Robinson's score from The Vampire Lovers, and the composer did a great job of evoking that. But there was also some Les Baxter type stuff that we tempted with. So you'll hear some stuff that is reminiscent of the Corman films, but there's also a lot of Hammer stuff in there, I think, as well.
I like that was like a reference to Elvira's Scream Queen period too, with all the sound effects she would do.
Yes. No, absolutely. For sure. Yes.
How did Richard O'Brien get involved with this? What was the connection?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. So we, the Vincent Price character, who were we going to cast? And Vincent Price had already passed away. Cassandra knew him. I had been very lucky enough to have met him many times over the years. And, but he was no longer with us, so who were we going to get? Of course, we tried to get Christopher Lee, and his agent was like, no, he doesn't do these types of movies anymore. He's not interested. So that was kind of disappointing. They had a connection to Mick Jagger, and they sent him the script, and he read it, but passed. One of Cassandra's closest friends is Richard Chamberlain, and he read it and was considering doing it for a while, and that would have been kind of an interesting choice. But as things happen, I think the absolute perfect person and best person of all was, kind of further down the list, and that was Richard O'Brien. And he, of course, was Riff Raff in Rocky Horror, and he also wrote Rocky Horror, the play, the music, the lyrics, and the screenplay of the movie. Just an absolutely brilliant guy. But he also loves Vincent Price and knew all the movies that we were spoofing, and he totally got it, and was very funny and could improvise things. Whereas someone like Richard Chamberlain, that's not his wheelhouse to do comedy. And so I think we just ended up with absolutely the perfect person for it. And he was a dream to work with, and was great. And a lot of movies that I do, you make friends, but once the movie's over, they kind of lose touch. And but Cassandra to this day remains one of my absolute closest friends, and I see her all the time. And although Richard O'Brien doesn't live in, he lives in England and also sometimes in New Zealand and Australia, he's always, he's not around much, but I get emails from him all the time. I've got like 2 in the last week. And it's just great, these friendships that have come out of this. And when you're shooting on location in some far-off place like Romania, it's like summer camp, and you really bond in a really strong way. And Scott Atkinson, who played Dr. Bradley and does the most incredible impression of George Sanders doing that role. I told him, I said, I had heard him do his George Sanders impression at a party, And I said, you have to do it for the whole movie. But when you're revealed to be a charlatan, how about switching over to Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins? So and he did the Dick Van Dyke perfect too. I mean, he's an incredible actor, and I love him to death. Mary Shear, who was Ema, she was, you probably remember her from Mad TV. She was one of the regulars on there, and she also came out of the Groundlings. The French maid, Mary Jo Smith, was from the Groundlings. And, you know, it was just a magical group of people. It was great fun. Anything else? Yes?
I really like the initial sequence when they get to the castle, and it's like that slapstick physical humor bit where it just keeps building on itself. Can you talk about that sequence and how it came to fruition?
Well, it was just you're talking about when they first walk in.
Yeah, and they're knocking everything over and stepping.
Well, it was just the idea that that Lord Helzibus would be sensitive of hearing, so we were just going to go completely over the top of how much noise can we possibly come up with to make to drive him out of his mind. And it just, we knew kind of what we wanted to do, and there were some ideas in the script, but it was just actually getting to the set and going, okay, if we put a gong here, we can have the maid try to pull the shoe off, and then her head can go in the gong, and it just turned into a little ping pong of what else could we do. And we were all laughing hysterically. It was great. There's a servant that's carrying a tray when she throws one of her shoes, and he dumps the tray. That actually was Cassandra's husband and the co-producer of the film. They're no longer married now, but that's Mark Pearson. But he was kind of a servant in the background with no lines. And what else can I tell you? The cat, we had, when she sits back on the rocking chair, of course it was a fake tail that the rocking chair actually goes down on, but when we cut to the little insert of the cat running away, they brought in this cat, but it was a little tiny kitten, and we were like, oh no, what do we do? And how do we shoot this shot and not hurt the cat or whatever? And so we hung this curtain so that the rocking chair was kind of backing up into a curtain. That way we could have the cat on the other side of the curtain. And we just were holding it at the bottom of the floor, and on action it just ran. And so anyway, just little things like that. It was fun.
Do you have outtakes?
We do have some outtakes, but it was shot on film, and so it was really, nowadays everybody with digital, you just shoot everything.
Yeah.
But we were, it was a tight budget, so we kind of rehearsed things a lot before we rolled the camera. And some of the funniest things that happened were just, happened without the film going. So
yes,
unfortunately, it would have been great if we had all of that.
She's putting together.
I know, we tried to put together a blooper reel, and not much of it made it onto film. But there is a short blooper reel, and I think I can't remember if it got on the extras of the DVD or not, but there was a short one. It's not as exciting as you might imagine.
Since
Yes.
young people like this young man probably hasn't seen Pit and the Pendulum and all
Oh,
of
yeah.
these crazy, would there be any way to show younger people what you were spoofing?
Yeah, you could do a side by side, like this scene was with that, and that would be a fun little extra to do. But then you have to get the rights from all those other movies, which would be expensive.
Yeah.
But yes.
The White Rabbit, was that sort of kind of in a roundabout way a Monty Python reference?
Which one?
The White Rabbit.
Oh, the White Rabbit. I guess. I mean, probably subliminally for sure, because we're all huge Monty Python fans. But it was just the idea of
Scary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know the theory of the rule of threes. It's in drama and comedy. You sort of have the setup, and you do it one more time, and then the payoff is at the end where you twist it. And what happened there is that she runs into the raven and screams, and then she sees the spider web, the spider, and screams again. And then the third time, the big payoff is, boom, she screams, and you cut to, it's just a rabbit eating a leaf. And so that was just, one of those moments that, we were tackling. We just thought, what is the most ridiculous thing that she could scream about? And it was the little sweet white rabbit. And then and then conversely, when she goes into the little secret passageway, there's a little white mouse, and you're expecting her to scream at that, and she's like, oh, hello. So, anyone else? Yes?
Who's the person that painted all the paintings, like the ones going up the stairs and the one of the girl?
Oh, weren't those fun? Well, the paintings themselves are classic, famous paintings in museums, but they got, they made copies of them and then cut out the face of Richard O'Brien and put him in, we had him pose in all these crazy mugging shots, and then they just cut out those faces and put them on as paintings. But that was fun, and in all those movies. I mean, certainly in the Price Poe movies, there were always paintings of the family ancestors and stuff. But I mean, that's a trope from every movie imaginable from all time, and so we had a lot of fun doing that one. Anybody else? What? No more questions? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Has Roger Corman or any of the old AIP people, have they seen the movie?
We've tried to get Roger Corman to watch this for years, and I don't know if he has. If he has, we haven't heard from him. They just screened it the opening night of the Hollywood Horror Fest this past summer in July, and Cassandra was there, and several of the actors. Richard O'Brien was not in the country, but Ema and Roxana and Dr. Bradley, they were all there. The composer was there, the editor, and they were introduced by Richard Matheson's son. And Richard Matheson wrote the script for Pit and the Pendulum, and was also famous for writing the book of I Am Legend that was made into the last days of, the last Man on Earth, thank you, the Vincent Price version, and then of course Will Smith did a later version of it, and Matheson's done so many genre things, but so it was kind of cool to have his son there, and his son had never seen it, and was just astounded and loved it, and was so appreciative of how loving we were to his father's work, and so that was very rewarding. Victoria Price was supposed to be there, and her car broke down, and I was really curious to hear what she thought, because I don't think she's ever seen it. But if anyone hears about Roger Corman, or you have a way to tie him down and hold his eyes open to watch it, I'd love to hear what he thought.
He'd love it.
And speaking of the music, the score was recorded with the Moscow Symphony, and I just think it's absolutely a brilliant score.
It is.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
The thing where the castle was going like to explode and like destroyed. Who built the little model thing? Like what?
Well, there was a special effects guy who built. He built a kind of a very cheap model. We didn't want it to look great. Mm-hmm. We wanted it to look cheesy. But he built a kind of a model of the castle, but it was kind of two-dimensional, kind of like the Monty Python animations, and then animated it and got it to look like the Titanic going down. That was my idea. I thought in House of Usher, if you've ever seen that, the house is sinking into the brine, I think they call it, or something like that, and throughout the movie, it's kind of settling in the way that this is always kind of settling. We took it a little more over the top. And, but in House of Usher, the house it's actually the walls are cracking and stuff. So we took that to another level, and I was saying, you know, let's have the whole living room with just this giant slice that where it's already kind of broken apart, and it's just going to continue. And then when we get to the end and it's sinking, let's let it sink like the Titanic. Have the whole, all the other piece snap off. And we, of course, had the composer do a little, you know, little riff of music that kind of evoked that, and it was fun. Anyone else? All right, before we go, I have a poster for the movie. It's an original poster from the first release, not a reprint. And I'm going to have a little quiz, and whoever can answer this first will win this poster, and then I'm happy to sign it for you if you would like me to. This, and I'll give you a little history about this poster. I designed the poster because I had actually been in marketing a bit in the 80s, and I wanted it to be an homage to the Pit and the Pendulum poster artwork, and this was based partly on the American half-sheet artwork that had the pendulum, and it had a guy upside down just like this. You'll see it if you go on Google. And then there was an Italian poster that used very similar artwork, but then had a very big face of Vincent Price floating sort of in the background here. And I'm like, and I said to Cassandra, I really want to kind of combine these two and have our poster look like that. And she loved the idea. She is very good friends with Olivia, the great cheesecake artist who does, all those great paintings of, help me, somebody.
Betty Page.
Thank you, Betty Page. And so we got in touch with Olivia, and she loved the idea, and so she did this incredible painting. And so this is the poster that came out back then. So I'm going to ask a question and see if whoever can come up with the answer first. When when Cassandra first started doing Elvira, it was hosting horror movies on local Los Angeles TV channel, and it became a very, very big hit overnight. But the thing that really pushed it over the edge is when they did a 3D week, an episode where she showed a 3D movie, and they sold 3D glasses at 7-Elevens all over the Southern California area for $5 a piece, and they sold 3 million.
Really?
And she got not a dime of it. But what was the film that she hosted that was 3D?
Robot Monster?
What is it?
Robot Monster?
No.
House of Wax.
Wait, hold on, one at a time. Yes.
House of Wax?
No.
Revenge of the Creature?
No.
The creature, the first creature?
No. I'll give you a hint. It was a Vincent Price movie. Yes.
House on Haunted Hill?
No.
I know. House of Wax.
No. You already said that.
House on. House on Haunted Hill.
It's got
No.
see right there.
Mad Magician?
You got it. And it was the success of that 3D episode that turned the show. The show became syndicated then and went all over the country, and that was considered like the defining moment that sort of propelled Elvira from being a local phenomenon to a nationwide one. So I'm happy to sign this for you after. They're probably wanting to start the next film.